When I first saw the Kobra X from Anycubic, I had one question. Can it compete with the Bambu Lab A1? In this video, that's exactly what I'm going to find out. And let me just say now, what I found was not what I was expecting. This video is sponsored by Wolfbox, but more on that later. For over 2 years now, the Bambu Lab A1 has been my recommendation to anybody wanting to get into 3D printing, as it strikes a great balance between quality, value, and build volume, which allows low friction entry into the hobby. This is exactly why so many people bought the A1 and swear by the Bambu Lab ecosystem. However, there have been a few hints recently at where Bambu Lab may be planning to go with their more closed ecosystem, and not everyone loves the way they do business. I'm not going to get into that here, but I wanted to see if it's possible to get all of the great qualities of the A1 without selling your soul to Bambu Lab. This Kobra X, just like most of the machines I review, was sent to me by the manufacturer. However, they have no control over anything I say, and they don't see the video before you do. If you decide you want to buy one of these printers at any point, then the links in the description will give you the best price available right now. The Kobra X from Anycubic has obvious influences from the hugely successful A1 when it comes to looks, but Anycubic haven't just tried to copy everything from the market leader. There are some clever engineering choices in the Kobra X that actually means that it can outperform the other printers in this class in areas that make a real difference to how much value it offers. First, there are some key areas where the Kobra X shines. Just like the A1, the Kobra X is a multi-filament 3D printer, which means it can switch between different spools of filament while printing to give you a finished model that contains different materials or colours. This is useful if you want decorative prints and don't want to paint them, or the mixing of materials can allow more functional prints to solve problems that single filament printers can't. The way the A1 and Kobra X change their filament appears very similar on first glance, but there's a subtle difference that has huge implications down the line. With the A1, Bambu Lab decided to put motors and gears in their separate AMS light unit to control each of the 4 different filament spools that it can feed to the printhead. In the printhead, there's only one set of extruder gears that purely controls how the one filament that's been fed into it is pushed through the nozzle. On the Kobra X, however, all 4 filaments are controlled inside the printer's ACE Gen 2 printhead, rather than by a separate filament feeder. The first benefit of the Kobra setup is that without the extra hardware, its price is a lot lower. That's not all though. You see, the printhead innovations don't end there. Anycubic have also maximised another feature that makes a big, tangible difference to how you use it. With all multi-filament single printhead printers, there is a set process that needs to be followed to make filament changes possible. The filament you want to stop printing with needs to be cut. The filament above the cutter needs to be pulled out of the way. The new filament you want to print with needs to be pushed down to where the old filament was cut, and then the new filament has to push what was left of the old filament below the cutter out of the nozzle before the printer can resume printing. This purged filament is removed from the printer and is wasted. Anycubic have already saved a bit of time with this whole process by not having to back the filament all the way out of the printhead and by having the next filament closer and ready to go. But they've also shortened the distance between the nozzle and the filament cutter. This means that when the new filament pushes what's left of the old filament out of the nozzle, it not only takes less time, it also wastes less filament. Through my own testing, I found that the average time it takes to change filament mid-print on the A1 was 74 seconds, and the Kobra X was 29 seconds quicker at only 45 seconds per filament change. That may not sound like a lot, but on a print like this multicolour benchy that I printed as a test, it can take a huge number of these filament swaps to get the end result. This particular model required 553 filament swaps. The purge time savings alone for the exact same model meant that the Kobra X finished printing over 5.5 hours before the A1. Not only did it finish quicker, the tiny saving on purge waste per filament change added up to over 100 grams less in overall wasted filament. When the actual model we wanted only weighs 13 grams, that's a big saving in waste. Filament waste is one of the biggest downsides to using single printhead multi-filament 3D printers, and Anycubic's clever engineering choices have reduced this by a significant margin. I should just say that with the back-to-back benchy tests that I filmed between the Kobra X and the A1, I'd forgotten to check the nozzle that I had fitted on the A1. It turns out that I had a 0.6mm nozzle fitted with the file sliced for a 0.4mm nozzle. That's why it looks so bad. I ran the exact same file again with the right nozzle to get the time and weight data for the test, which came out much better and proved that the nozzle size didn't change the results. So where are the compromises with the Kobra X then? Surely a cheaper, faster printer that produces less waste must have some major downsides. Well, not really. I've been testing this machine for a couple of months now and it hasn't missed a beat. In fact, I've found that this budget machine has been outperforming some of the much more expensive 3D printers I've been testing at the same time. To test the print quality, I ran this 3D printer test print on both the A1 and the Kobra X, and the Kobra X handled overhangs much better than the A1. The A1 actually failed to complete the overhang section not once, but twice. Among other things, this indicates that cooling on the Kobra X is at least as good, if not better. I was mainly interested in the overhang performance with this test, but dimensionally, both machines were very close to each other on all of the measurable features too. If I were to be hypercritical, the A1 has slightly less in the way of ghosting on exterior walls, but it's very minimal. Now I should say that I'm using default slicer profiles and each manufacturer's slicer for all of these prints. A slicer is the software that takes any 3D model and slices it into layers for your 3D printer to print one at a time. I thought about using the same profiles or the same slicers, but any way I looked at it, I could argue that I'd be introducing unfair variables. Nowadays, the printer and slicer profiles are pretty much all part of the same package. One thing that I really wasn't expecting from the Kobra X, and something that hardly anybody seems to talk about, is the way that it handles flexible materials. I've been living under the assumption that even though many of these single print head printers can print with flexible filaments like TPU, switching between flexible filaments mid-print was never going to be possible without multiple extruders or tool heads. This is mainly because you can't push flexible filament down a long tube like you can with more rigid materials. But of course, because the Kobra X doesn't need to do that to change filament, it can actually swap flexible filaments mid-print too. And it does it incredibly well. Its Ace Gen 2 printhead also uses what it calls an adaptive extrusion force compensator to change how hard it grips different types of filament, which is also very important when printing with flexibles. As I said, I've been testing some much more expensive 3D printers alongside the Kobra X, some of them multi-print head machines. But every single print that I've been able to complete on these multi-print head machines, the Kobra X has done too. The only difference is that there's some purge waste and the print takes longer with the Anycubic machine, as it takes more time to do a filament change than to just swap a print head. Up until very recently, the only machine that I had that could do anything other than a single material print with flexible filament was the Bambu Lab H2D. And even the most basic version of that machine costs 7 times the price of this one. And the H2D still can't do 4 colour multi-material prints with 4 flexible filaments. I'm genuinely impressed with this budget 3D printer. If you've not watched any of my reviews before, I rarely get this excited. Not since I received my first Bambu Lab 3D printer have I seen a new machine from another manufacturer that has demonstrated so much clever design and thinking as there is here with the Anycubic Kobra X. The features don't stop there either. Without a separate AMS style filament holder, the Kobra X takes up less room on a desk or work surface too. It's a little bit taller, but only about 50mm or 2 inches. Because of the sliding bed, the two machines take up the same room from front to back, but the Kobra X is only 460mm wide. The A1 with the AMS light alongside it takes up 700mm. That smaller overall footprint doesn't mean your prints have to be smaller. In fact, the Kobra X's print volume is slightly bigger than the A1's at 260mm cubed rather than 256mm cubed from the Bambu Lab machine. To test the bed heat up times, I set both beds to 100 degrees and timed how long it took each one to get there, according to the printer's display. But I also filmed each bed with a thermal imaging camera at the same time so that I can show you how well that bed is actually heated when the printer says it's ready. The A1 said its bed was heated, ready for printing after only 1 minute and 7 seconds from cold, which is very quick. However, the thermal image shows that at that point, some areas of the bed are 17 degrees over the desired temperature, and it's clear that there are some much cooler patches in other areas. Realistically, it's another 32 seconds before the heat spread and temperatures are where you'd want them to be for printing. This isn't really a big problem because the printer uses this time to do other things like priming the nozzle. By the time the print starts, the heat is more even and closer to where it should be. The Kobra X takes a little longer to hit its target temperature at 1 minute and 19 seconds, but when it gets there, the heat is much more even across the bed at this point, and you could start printing on it. What's interesting to me is that even after 4 minutes, the A1's heat spread never really evens out, and there's still a 10-degree difference between the hottest and coolest areas. Both machines are perfectly usable when it comes to bed heating performance, but with the Kobra X, the heat spread is much more uniform at all times. Now, before we move on to noise levels and some of the remaining comparisons, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Wolfbox. Wolfbox contacted me a few months ago because they were genuinely interested in seeing if I thought their new MF200 would be a useful tool for 3D printing. The MF200 is a rechargeable compressed air duster that puts out a surprisingly powerful blast of air for something you can hold in one hand. Am I going to try and tell you that it's an essential 3D printing tool that you just can't live without? No, I'm not. It's handy for cleaning out dust and filament poop now and again, and I did find it helps cool hotbeds down quicker so that you can remove prints sooner. But other than that, I honestly didn't find many 3D printing specific uses. However, it is my new favourite workshop and household tool. I've used this tool for so many different things, I'm going to struggle to remember them all. I've used it for starting campfires, clearing cut grass, drying awkward areas on my son's bike after we washed it, and generally any job where I'd normally be reaching for compressed air. But my absolute favourite use so far has been cleaning the horrendous amount of dust out of my PC. This was a job that I was putting off for months, but the Wolfbox 200 did it in seconds. This tool has saved me hours, not really while 3D printing, but as a general workshop and household tool, I genuinely love it. It's USB-C rechargeable, has 3 power levels and a battery level indicator, and comes with different nozzles and brushes to suit any job. If you think the Wolfbox MF200 looks useful, then check out the links in the description, where you'll also find a special discount code just for those of you who didn't skip this bit. Now, where were we? When it comes to noise levels, both machines are very quiet. The loudest part of the whole process on both machines is actually the little tune they play before printing. Actual print volume on the A1 peaks at 51 decibels, but the average is only 41. The Kobra X peaks at 52 decibels, but the average is quite a bit higher at 47. So the Kobra is a bit louder on average when printing, but as I say, both machines seem very quiet. Nozzle changes on printers have become very quick these days, but often that's because you end up swapping the whole hot ends rather than screwing a nozzle in and out like we used to do in the old days. With the Kobra X, it's a little different. You only change the nozzle and the heat zone tube directly above it, which should reduce nozzle change costs. However, I just checked, and replacing this part on the Kobra X will cost you $15. The whole hot end that you replace on the A1 is only $11. So whilst it's a nice idea, Anycubic need to get their spares costs down to make this a useful feature. I managed to change the A1's hot end in 36 seconds, and the Kobra X took me 11 seconds longer, but this was mainly because I had some trouble fitting the silicone sock. With a bit of practice, I don't think there would be much in it. The initial setup on bed slingers, like both the A1 and Kobra X, is generally a bit more involved, as you have to bolt together at least the base and gantry and connect a few cables. Both machines make it very easy though, and the processes are very similar when putting together the main printer. However, as you have to assemble the AMS light with the A1, and with the Kobra X you only have to clip on the spool holders to the top of the gantry, it takes a lot less time to get printing with the Kobra. And you might think that not having the AMS to help you load filament would be a big negative, but while it does take a little longer to load filament, I didn't find it excessive. With the Bambu Lab machine, you place your spool on the spool holder and feed the end into the AMS filament inlet. The motors on the AMS then take the filament and feed it halfway down the feed tubes, ready to feed it into the print head when you want to print. With the Kobra X, you place your spool on the spool holder and then feed the end into the filament feed tube, but instead of the printer taking it from you, you keep feeding it in manually until it reaches the print head. When it's in the right place, you hear a confirmation tone to tell you the filament's loaded. Unloading each machine is practically identical, as with both you just pull it out. Bambu Lab AMS units automatically read RFID chips in their own brand filament and then automatically load the filament information to the printer. The Kobra X does have RFID for Anycubic filament, but you have to wave it past the sensor on the base before loading it, which, after testing it out, I didn't bother doing again. It's so quick and easy to input the filament details on the screen, I don't think I'd really care at all if RFID wasn't included on either machine. It's rare that I print Bambu Lab filament on a Bambu Lab machine and Anycubic filament on an Anycubic machine anyway, in which case this feature does nothing anyway. However, if you do plan on being brand loyal with your filament and want to save the 5 seconds of manually inputting the filament details, then any Bambu Lab machine does make this process slicker. So, while both of the setups I have here allow you to print with 4 different filaments, they're each expandable if you want to buy additional hardware. If you want to buy 4 of Anycubic's Ace 2 Pro units at $290 each, you'd be able to print with 19 different colours in one print with the Kobra X. That's because additional filament feed units all connect to just one of the original filament inlets, so the other 3 original filament tubes are still available to use. 4 times 4 plus 3 is 19. With the Bambu Lab A1, it is possible to expand to 16 colours, but you can't use your AMS Lite as part of that 16. That means if you want to add AMS units, you need to buy one whole AMS 1 or 2 Pro plus the AMS hub before you even start adding any capacity. It would take too long to go through all of the possible combinations, so here's a table of the least expensive way to add multicolour capacity to each of these printers if that's what you're interested in doing. As you can see, if you want to print with 16 colours in one print, then there's very little difference in price. But if you want to print with 5 colours, the difference is ridiculous. So, when it comes to Bambu Lab's Ace card, its connectivity and ease of printing for beginners, Anycubic are trying hard, but it's going to take a monumental effort from anyone to catch up to the massive success of MakerWorld and how integrated it is with Bambu Lab 3D printers. If you've never used a 3D printer, the quick version is that you need to use software called a slicer to take any 3D model and get it ready for your printer. This software needs to run on a computer. If all you have is a phone or a tablet, then there are online cloud slicer options if you pay a monthly subscription, but realistically, you ideally still need a computer. However, what Bambu Lab did was set up an online community-driven 3D model repository called MakerWorld. Here, users can upload any model they've already sliced, ready for a Bambu Lab printer. This means that if you have a Bambu Lab printer, you can find any model in the library, and as long as there's a profile for the model you have, which there very likely will be, you can print that model directly from an app on your phone. This has made 3D printing massively more accessible to new users, and I know some people who've only ever printed from the Bambu Handy app. What's great about this resource is if you don't have a Bambu Lab printer, you can still download the models for free and just slice them ready for your particular machine. But you do need a PC or an online subscription with any other non-Bambu Lab printer. What Anycubic have done is very similar, but they've also gone one step further. With Anycubic's app, and only using your phone, you can download an STL file and then upload this file to the Anycubic app, and slice that file and print it all within their app. You can't do this with Bambu Handy. Now, the Anycubic app is nowhere near as simple and smooth an experience as Bambu Handy, but it does offer some features that Bambu Lab don't. There's also a MakerWorld style file library, but it's much smaller than the Bambu Lab version at the moment. MakerWorld now has over 2.5 million original models, which makes it arguably the biggest 3D printing model resource available now, bigger than Thingiverse, bigger than Printables, and certainly a lot bigger than Anycubic's Maker Online. Once you've sliced and started your print running, you might want to see how the print is progressing using the live camera view. Both printers allow this through their respective apps, but with the A1, the video has an extremely low frame rate and it's more a series of jerky pictures than what I would call a video. The video feed from the Kobra X, on the other hand, is high quality and silky smooth. The lines on these videos are from my new LED light that appears to cause flicker with these feeds. What's not good, however, is the camera angle on either machine. They both point down too low to see clearly what's actually happening at the nozzle, which is what I want to see when I watch a camera feed. Also, the lights on both machines are terrible. If I turn off the other lights, coupled with the bad camera angle, you can barely see the model at all, let alone see if the print's going well or not. So, before this video gets too long, what else do we need to compare? The way that removable print surfaces locate on printers' beds has always been a personal bugbear of mine, and I've always said that the A1 series of printers don't do this well. There's just no positive way to line it up when you replace it, and it always takes a few attempts or two hands to make sure it's straight. It's not a difficult problem to solve, and Anycubic have proved it. Just 2 pins on the bed and 2 corresponding indents on the removable print surface, and you get it perfect every time with one hand. I spoke earlier about how long it takes to assemble these printers and get them set up for printing, but once you do turn a 3D printer on for the first time, they all need to calibrate a few things before you can start printing. Thankfully, everything here is fully automated on both machines, and all you have to do is start the setup process with a button press and then wait for it to complete. What the Kobra X also has is AI assistance with features like foreign object detection, so the print doesn't start if something's on the bed, and spaghetti detection, which should catch a failed print. The A1 doesn't have these, I believe because it has less processing power, and that stuttering camera feed would make it difficult anyway. So, if the Anycubic Kobra X is so good and so much cheaper, and it does all that the A1 does and more, why aren't they flying off the shelves? Well, it basically comes down to the way each company has behaved in the past. Bambu Lab have come in, released only a few very high quality printers, supported every one of them with regular updates, developed a whole ecosystem that works virtually seamlessly, looked after their customers with good product support, and they continue to add more and more free resources to their already comprehensive software options. This means that anyone can buy a Bambu Lab 3D printer, download an app, and print almost anything they want over and over again, without having to know anything about how the printer works, and have confidence that the manufacturer isn't going to abandon it in 6 months' time. Anycubic, on the other hand, have been around a lot longer. They were making 3D printers when the technology was a lot less advanced. In those days, running a 3D printer was the hobby. It was acceptable to have to learn to tinker and get your printer running right. Nobody was holding the printer manufacturers to the same standards that they are today. If it turned out that a particular model had a fundamental flaw or fault, the manufacturer wouldn't recall it or send out free parts to fix it. It was accepted that we were pioneers in the technology and we expected to find problems. All the manufacturers would do is drop the price on any stock they had left in the hope that they could clear the stock and then start again with a brand new model. This meant that manufacturers were releasing multiple different printers in a year in small quantities, hoping that their latest one would sell well so that they could make more. Unfortunately, even if they've now woken up to the way you need to do business nowadays, that old reputation doesn't go away quickly. You only have to do a quick search online to find people criticising older models for not being supported or a lack of customer after-sales support. I'm not going to tell you that Anycubic have changed their ways or say that you'll get the Bambu Lab experience from them if you buy this 3D printer. Only time will tell when it comes to assessing how Anycubic support their latest new customers. I really hope that they have everything in place behind the scenes, because out front, this 3D printer shows all the signs of being a Bambu Lab killer. If you're looking for a very capable 3D printer with a huge number of high quality features, then I don't believe you'll find a better deal than the Anycubic Kobra X. However, if you absolutely have to have the Bambu Lab experience and are not prepared to make any compromises or take any risk, even if it's likely very slight, the A1 or the A1 Mini are still great machines that you won't regret buying. We really have come a very long way with 3D printing, and it blows my mind what we can now do with machines that cost so little. Remember that there are links to great prices on both of these machines in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.